Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the February DC Post First Friday webinar. My name is Whitney Stoll, and welcome back to our First Friday webinar series. And with our guest, Tracy Marcinowski, and she's presenting the Acquisition 2026, the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul, Commercialization, and Consolidation. Joined by me is Samantha Long and Bree Beal, who are going to be monitoring the chat and also running behind the show from behind the scenes. So we have over 100 registered participants from all over the world ready to learn during today's webinar. So today, Tracy will share the latest information on the evolution of the acquisition environment, looking at the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul and related regulatory changes that extend beyond IT to influence federal design and construction programs. But first, I'd like to welcome you all to introducing you to the First Friday webinar series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession through these monthly education-focused sessions aligned with SAME's strategic goals to drive partnerships, deliver solutions, and develop people. So thank you all for joining us here today as we start our program. So please feel free to use the chat, introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, where you're joining us from today, and your email. Share with everyone at any time throughout the program today. Ask questions in the chat so we can address them during our Q&A portion at the end. So we are using Adobe Connect now, so you can chat with everyone and send messages to the host, to the presenters, and with each other. We are recording today's session. We will post a video on our YouTube channel later on. A copy of your slides, your PDH certificate, and an opt-in list of attendees will be available to download at the end of today's webinar. And we'll also email you a copy as soon as the webinar ends. So just look for an email labeled document delivery and along with all your downloads. So we are excited to provide you an hour of education and virtual networking no matter where you're calling in from. So we would like to take a moment to thank our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild and KCCT. So we definitely appreciate your support, and we are grateful for your generosity by making this webinar series possible for our members and the SAME community. We just started a new year of annual sponsorship, so now is your opportunity to support this webinar series as a DC Post annual sponsor. We'd love to be able to add your firm's logo to the slide for future programs and events through 2026. So annual platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this webinar event with free registration for SAME members and full-time students. So please visit our website for more information about sponsorship levels and how you can gain visibility for your company while giving back to the SAME community through your annual sponsorship. So now it's on to the main program. And this program will provide one professional development hour from the DC Post. And I'm not going to read through the learning objectives on the slides, since most of you have seen the learning objectives already. Instead, I'm going to introduce to you Tracy in just a moment. And while I'll do the introduction, if you haven't done so already, please use the chat to introduce yourselves, share contact information, and where you're joining us from today. So this is your webinar series to help you learn about the special topic, as well as expand your business network at the same time. Please use the chat throughout the presentation, share comments, and ask questions. If there is a particular slide you'd like to talk about, please share that detail in your question as well. And we will answer questions at the end of the program. So you cannot save the chat, so please make sure you make any notes before you exit the webinar. Now, please join me in welcoming Tracy Marcinowski to our DC Post First Friday webinar. Tracy is a managing partner for Strategic Acquisition Solutions, where she leverages more than 25 years of federal and industry acquisition experience to help organizations navigate and simplify complex procurement challenges. You may recognize her from her previous role as Assistant Commissioner for Acquisition at GSA's Public Building Service, where she led a $7 billion procurement portfolio and a nationwide workforce of more than 800 federal employees. So Tracy, welcome to the First Friday webinar, and now I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Whitney. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm honored to be here and appreciate the SAME DC Post for hosting this conversation. There's been a lot of noise lately around federal acquisition reform, and much of it has been framed through a technology lens. Today, we're going to ground that conversation specifically in what it means for the AEC community. And I do apologize because I'm kind of switching back and forth between slides. So if I seem to pause, that's why. So we're going to focus on three interconnected trends shaping the 2026 acquisition environment. We're going to talk about the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul, or RFO as they like to call it, the commercialization of federal construction and contract consolidation. I want to acknowledge upfront that there is still a lot of uncertainty. Agencies and industry are both learning in real time, and equilibrium has not yet been reached. If you've been reading memos, seeing new terms surface, or hearing headlines that don't seem to clearly connect to your day-to-day work, you're not alone. What is clear is that the traditional acquisition model many of us grew up with is shifting. That shift affects how projects are scoped, competed, evaluated, and ultimately delivered. So let's dig into what's driving these changes and what they mean for firms operating in this environment. So a lot of agencies are under increasing pressure to deliver projects faster, cheaper, with stronger outcomes. That's not new. On time, on budget, delivery, they've always been what defines success on a project. What has changed is the acquisition playbook agencies are rely on to get there. Aging infrastructure, climate impacts, mission expansion, and constrained budgets are making highly prescriptive government-defined solutions harder to sustain. The traditional model where the government designs the solution in detail and industry simply executes just no longer works at scale. So as we move into 2026 and beyond, what we're seeing is acquisitions are increasingly becoming outcome-based. Or I'm a little old school, so I still remember when we used to call it performance-based, and we're still looking to the government to kind of define what the difference is going to be between performance-based acquisitions and outcome-based acquisitions. But ultimately, agencies are shifting away from telling industry exactly how to build something and instead focusing on what needs to be achieved. This acceleration is being driven not only by external pressures, but also by internal realities. Agencies are experiencing significant losses in institutional and technical expertise. As a result, they have to rely more heavily than they have even in most recent past on industry judgment to define credible, executable solutions. And success is no longer measured by strict adherence to government instructions. Compliance will not get you there. It's measured by whether or not your approach is feasible, resilient, and aligned with mission needs, and whether you can engage productively with agencies navigating this change in real time. And these changes are not accidental. They're being reinforced through formal policy changes. And the most notable of that is the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul. One of the key aspects of the FAR Overhaul is that it looks to empower the contracting officer, to have them use their best judgment, to work with industry, to find those solutions. Now, beginning in 2025, the FAR Council initiated a sweeping effort to simplify the FAR and pull it back down to its statutory roots. Issued in April 1st, 1984, the FAR had kind of grown from what it had been originally to almost 3,000 pages. The council was given 180 days to rewrite a regulation that had grown that much over 40 years. Throughout FY25, FAR revisions were released rapidly through deviations. We didn't know which ones were coming. We kind of just had to stalk the acquisition.gov website and see when they came out, and then read and digest and communicate with others to figure out what that meant for us. We didn't get the whole picture until they finally finished releasing at the end of FY25. Some of the changes were modest. Most of the original language was statutory and there wasn't much we could do to change it. Others were complete restructures. Long-standing procedures were moved out of the FAR itself and into practitioner guides and the FAR Companion. As a result, many agencies are still working to operationalize the new language. Systems, templates, and supplemental regulations are still catching up. And this was only the first phase. In the coming months, as spring hits us, we're expecting that these changes will formally enter the rulemaking, allowing finally for true public comment. Despite the pace and disruption, it's important to acknowledge the scale of this effort. Simplifying a decades-old regulatory framework under tight timelines was no small task, and the initiative represents a serious attempt to modernize acquisition. I applaud the FAR Council for the work that they've done, knowing that the intentions were positive. For AEC firms specifically, the most impactful changes were to be found in FAR Parts 2, 15, 16, and 36. The FAR overhaul reorganized the entire FAR around the acquisition lifecycle, pre-solicitation, evaluation and award, and post-award. Created further changes. And a critical takeaway for you today is much of the practical how-to guidance that once was in the FAR, like site visits, proposal conferences, those things were taken out of the FAR and they were put into practitioner guides and into the FAR Companion. So you must remember you can't read just the deviated FAR language and have it stand alone. You have to be reading the practitioner guides and the companions alongside the FAR text to fully understand the government's new expectations. But the overarching signal is clear. Agencies will provide fewer detailed designs, grant more discretion to industry, and expect greater accountability in return. So policy change doesn't happen in a vacuum. Over the past decade, the federal acquisition workforce has been significantly reduced through retirements, attrition, hiring freezes, and private sector competition. And yes, I did say over the past decade. The loss that we have been seeing was very much accelerated in 2025 with the RIFs, the DRPs, and other individuals deciding to depart for industry or for retirement. Much of the institutional knowledge that supported sound construction acquisition judgment is gone, as is the program expertise side. At the same time, agencies are being asked to implement the most ambitious acquisition reforms in decades, and the training has not kept pace with the policy velocity, especially for complex delivery models like design build and progressive design build. The result is a structural gap between policy intent and field level execution. And I'm sure many of you have already begun to experience some of this where you see what the policy says, but then you talk to the CO or the PM out in the field and the news hasn't fully gotten across. So inconsistency across agencies, regions, and districts is not a failure. It's to be an expected condition of this transition. Firms that recognize this reality and plan for it are going to be better positioned than those expecting uniform interpretation and execution. You should not be surprised if your CO is asking you questions or doesn't know how to answer things or hasn't updated all of their documentation to match the new realities that we are facing. What I mentioned that FAR Part 2, which is typically known as the definitions, was especially impactful to the AEC community as one of the changes. And this is because one of the most consequential and under-discussed elements was the explicit recognition of construction as a commercial activity. FAR Part 36 didn't mention it, but the definition of a commercial item or service in FAR Part 2 which long has been silent on construction. And that was taken by all the lawyers and policy groups to mean that construction was not considered commercial. It changed, and it now calls out construction as part of the commercial activity. That definition matters because by treating construction as commercial, agencies are no longer required to rely exclusively on bespoke government unique approaches. Instead, they are empowered to adopt delivery models, risk frameworks, and business practices that mirror how construction is successfully delivered in the private sector. The shift opens meaningful opportunities for AEC firms. Having said that, there's also going to be a transition period and a period while agencies figure out what exactly commercialization of construction means. They have not operated under that environment for the past 100 years. So it'll take them a while, but it does enable them for a broader use of design build, progressive design build, and CM at risk. And it supports solicitations that focus on outcomes rather than rigid government developed solutions. And agencies are increasingly asking, how would industry do this if the government were not involved? At the same time, commercialization is occurring alongside a clear consolidation trend. So I'm sure that a lot of people are going to have questions regarding what that means exactly. If we're going to consolidate contracts and now there's going to be commercial construction, how does this impact? Will I have to work with different agencies? And the answer is we're still trying to figure it out. What we do know is that risk is moving upstream. The expectations of these agencies are going to be that industry is coming up with these solutions and some of these answers because they have had such an institutional loss of knowledge over the past year. So as we move to consolidation, what does that really mean? I know a lot of folks hear consolidation in the acquisition environment and they think of my former agency, GSA's, the Public Building Services sister service, the Federal Acquisition Service, which is responsible for government-wide contracts. We might see some of that, but what we are going to see definitely as part of this consolidation trend is agencies moving away from one-off standalone construction awards and towards a larger programmatic vehicles. So they've lost all these people. They don't have as many people to deliver their programs and their missions as they used to, which means that they're going to rely heavily on acquisition vehicles like multiple award IDIQs to be able to deliver their programs. And these will support repeat work across portfolios. So they're going to be looking for similarities across their upcoming projects to determine how they can utilize these vehicles to help fill in some of the gaps that exist with the reduction in the workforce. Now, under these models, performance is going to be evaluated at the program level, not just project by project. So agencies are going to be looking for partners who can deliver consistently, manage multiple concurrent efforts, and scale across locations and scopes. For small and mid-sized firms, consolidation does not mean exclusion. I know that has been a big concern, especially when the government started moving towards strategic sourcing and category management a few years ago. It just means that they are looking at things differently. So for small and mid-sized firms, as well as large firms, it's going to require strategy. Successful firms are going to be the ones who position themselves through teaming, specialization, and clearly defined roles within those larger vehicles. Think it's not about just getting on a GSA schedule. How are you going to use that schedule? So for the AEC community, it's not just how am I going to get on this national A&E contract, but who's going to be utilizing that national A&E contract? what kind of tools am I going to have to market to them? How am I going to help them develop projects? How am I going to help them understand scope? You have to be ready and willing to fully partner and help the government shape what comes through these vehicles. Together, commercialization and consolidation can reward firms that think beyond individual procurements and operate with some systems level discipline. This is probably a lot for everybody to take in. And there are some realities that we just can't get past. With the growing institutional knowledge gaps, agencies are going to be relying more heavily on industry expertise to compensate for limited internal capacity. Now, one of the realities that we still have to face is that while the acquisition policy has changed, the reality of budgets has not. And as a result, we're not going to see a wholesale change overnight. We're still going to see projects that get, funding for design in 1 year and funding for construction 5 years later. And that's going to impact how agencies and how industry works together. Unfortunately, all the changes in the world you can want, but if you don't have the money to implement them, that's where a lot of the challenges are going to come in. So we're going to be looking at how we can bridge those gaps. Early engagement, honest dialogue, and decision-ready solutions are going to matter more than ever. The most competitive firms are not going to wait for the government to define every requirement. They're going to realize that the government is working with limited resources. They know what they have to do. They're just looking at a very large mountain that they have to scale and not really sure where to put their first foot or first hand. So firms who are able to present options, explain trade-offs, and show how desired outcomes can be achieved are going to be the ones who prove themselves for the best partnerships. But keep in mind, winning the award is only a piece of this. Past performance is going to become even more critical than it ever has before. The agencies are not going to be forgiving of poor performance. They're going to be because they're focused on outcomes, they're going to be looking at how you delivered. And if you didn't deliver exactly to how they expected it, that will negatively impact past performance. That will keep you from being involved in some of these larger scale programmatic multiple award IDIQs. So the ability to deliver is going to be critical. Now, in 2026, acquisition's not going to be about shortcuts. We are still going to have some of the noise that we've been hearing. I'm still going to, every time I go out in public, get asked about OTAs for construction projects. There's going to be some of that continues. And we're going to try some different things and possibly fail at a couple of things. But what the 2026 acquisition environment and beyond is going to be about is delivering better outcomes in a system that honestly is under a lot of strain right now. So we could look at this and see the chaos and that's all we see, or we can look at it and see the opportunity that we have to shape federal project delivery. But we need to make sure that we're leading with maturity, transparency, and leadership rather than compliance alone. Now, having said that, compliance is still important. We have reading the fine print, ensuring that you are reading everything, all of the links and references in government documents is going to be important, because just like with the FAR overhaul, we are seeing things not residing where we're used to, which means We have to read the practitioner albums. We have to read the FAR companion. Then we have to go back and look at the agency supplemental regulation and see if anything has changed there. There's going to be a gap between the systems, the templates, and the information on the day-to-day for a while. And will probably be a couple of years before we see things kind of calm down enough that we see consistency. So you're going to see agencies, issuing proposals that RFPs that look wildly different than what you're used to. And then you're going to see agencies who seem like they just haven't heard anything that's been going on. Part of this is going to be partnering with them to help them navigate through this. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to get to the better outcomes, to ensure that we're delivering the mission for the American people. And on the industry side, to ensure that we're able to continue to win and to support and grow our business. Firms that are able to lead with maturity, transparency, and leadership, rather than just focusing on the compliance or waiting for the CO to tell them something, or the PM who may now be in a position that they weren't expected to be in, according to their individual development plan for a couple more years. Firms that do that well, who partner, will not just adapt to this acquisition reform, they're going to help define what comes next. And I'm going to urge everybody that when the FAR formal rulemaking comes out, to take a clear look at it, to really read and digest the information that's coming out and provide thoughtful comments. Now, it's not a guarantee that everything that we'd like to see, every procurement project delivery methodology comes to pass. As I said, the budget laws and the financial laws have not changed. It's just the acquisition policy that's being changed right now. But we will see opportunities, and we can help these agencies who have been relying on things that they can no longer rely on. Help them to see, be a little more transparent on how we manage things on the commercial side of the house, so that they can better adopt best practices and understand these things and work internally to try and ensure that those things end up in those practitioner albums and the FAR companion. So when the formal rulemaking comes out, please ensure that you make sure that you add your voice to the comments, and then make your voice heard to help structure how this works in the future. And in the meantime, as a former Fed and having many friends still on the inside, have some patience with those who are still there, who are just trying to figure out how to deliver their mission in the best possible way. I know it can be a little frustrating at times when you don't know who to call, you finally get a hold of someone, they don't know what's going on. Nobody is doing this from a malicious standpoint. They are all just trying to do the best they can, and working together and being that partner to them will serve you well in the future as they learn what their new realities are. So that was actually a little less than 40 minutes. So either I'm talking way too fast or I just didn't come up with enough information.
No, Tracy, not at all. This is there's a lot that's going on here, so don't feel it's an ongoing, let's say, overhaul lot that's going on in here. But please, I think it gives us plenty of time here to really be able to engage with people who are on here. So please feel free. Tracy did a great job here breaking it down. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. And if you have any questions for Tracy or anything that she has broken down, but definitely would love to kind of get your opinion on where this overhaul is going. So, with so many of the changes happening, from your standpoint, what are the best way firms can stay informed and engaged with the federal agencies right now?
So one of the best ways to stay informed, obviously, is to be regularly checking acquisition.gov. You need to know what the policy changes are going to be when the rulemaking comes out. So either you need to be following voices on LinkedIn or on, stalking the acquisition.gov website like I do, or you need to have somebody who is. There's a lot of people who are watching this closely, willing to share their information, but you really need to stay on top of it. Not just the headlines, but really reading what's going on, the analyses, how the impact. The FAR never stands alone. So you don't just have 36 stands alone and something changes in 15 and it doesn't impact. You need to either have that expertise in-house or engage with somebody who has that expertise to understand how all these layer together, how one thing impacts another thing. So then with the agencies, industry engagement is going to be critical. Where the agencies are coming out in public and sharing their information, highly recommend attending. Obviously, SAME does a wonderful job with supporting industry engagement. When the agencies start doing industry days, or they start doing roundtables again, asking when they come out and they say, give us your thoughts, give them your thoughts, engage with them. Make it a point to ensure that your voice is heard through the formal rulemaking, through just attending events and talking to them about what they're seeing, how they're thinking through things. Many of them are willing to sit down and have a conversation about, I'm being told by my leadership that I need to do an OTA, and I don't even know what to do. I don't know what that is. So sit down with them and talk through their challenges. They need a sounding board, and that can be very beneficial for you.
Absolutely. And I'm full-hearted leveraging trade association, places like SAME, whether it's the local post, the national, or anywhere around the country. Wholehearted support. And thanks for the kind words, Tracy. Things that we're doing here. I'll go on to the next question. For firms that are curious on consolidated contracts but aren't sure where they fit, what are some of the practical steps that they can take, and is there anything that they need to be aware of?
So not everybody's going to be the prime on some of these contracts, and it's really going to come down to how agencies think things through from a programmatic standpoint. What we might see is not a national A&E contract or a national construction contract. We might see smaller things, construction around security infrastructure upgrades. So really clearly reading and listening to agencies when they say what they're focusing on with these consolidation efforts, and then looking at what is my value, what is my skill set, what do I sell, and having that honest conversation with yourself about where do you fit in the supply chain is going to be vital, because it may not be something. I mean, if you're talking a national contract for multiple agencies, that's a lot. That can be a lot. You may not have the bandwidth. So that's where teaming arrangements, partnerships, understanding who can you partner with is going to be vital to whether or not you go in on these contracts. It's going to be a big decision. And sometimes I think people get lured in a little bit by like the high dollar ceilings. one of the best practical pieces of advice I can give people is throughout my career, I have seen a lot of large multiple award IDIQs awarded. I've also seen a lot that were not utilized, which means that not only did industry expend an enormous amount of bid and proposal dollars to get on that vehicle, but the government also expended a lot of money and time and resources that they didn't really have to create those vehicles. So, as part of your decision-making process, do the research. Find out how that agency has done previously on other types of multiple award contracts in the past, not just for construction, for other types of services. Utilizing search engines like usaspending.gov and FPDS, they can be difficult. Again, that's where some people who understand some of that data can help. But knowing if they kind of have a habit of throwing together big contract vehicles and then not necessarily utilizing them can help you decide if this is something you want to pursue. It can also help you decide if you see that they really only, they're kind of focused on a certain type of contractors when they award. And that can help you drive some of those partnering conversations and sub-agreements between you and others.
So here's one that has to deal with the with the DRP and the less, I guess, I'd say more people on the contracting side. There's less people taking retirement or DRP. So do you think with the consolidation and less government employees available, that more project managed contracts will be open to AEC firms to help agencies move their missions forward?
I think absolutely. I mean, it becomes a supply versus demand, and I'm just going to use my previous agency's publicly available information. If you have 15,000 actions a year with 800 people, and honestly, you were kind of struggling to meet all of the demand, and now you have 30% less, or in some cases, in some offices, maybe 50 to 60% less staff, and still the same amount of demand, if not more demand, you have to come up with a different methodology.
Right.
The definition of insanity is doing things the exact same way and expecting different outcomes.
Got it. Absolutely. So if you could give one piece of advice to someone trying to make that the sense of all these acquisition changes, what would that recommendation be? I'd say it's very general. What would you give them?
I would say take it a piece at a time. Understand the context in which it's coming from. If you're hearing terminology that you really don't understand, and I'm just kind of glancing at the chat that's ongoing, and I know the question was asked about other transactions authority, which is this term that the AEC community has had to get very familiar with this past year without fully understanding where it came from. Take it a piece at a time. Understand where it came from, why they might be talking about it, and try not to get too overwhelmed or think that you have to go running out and doing things all at once. And that goes for both sides of the house. There's a lot coming at us, and we can get very lost in the noise. At the end of the day, some things are going to stay the same. And with the AEC community, while we have a lot of innovations and leveraging of technology and things of that nature, at the end of the day, it's still very brick and mortar, very strong foundations that we're building off of. So try not to, so take it a piece at a time and ask the question. If you don't understand what it is, ask the question. Don't be afraid. I have people, sending me a text and being like, so I just heard so-and-so talk about this, and I'll tell you what it is. I'll even tell you if it's one of something like the Emperor's New Clothes. We call it new, but it still wasn't new 20 years ago when I was using it, and we just called it by a different name now.
Absolutely. So I've got one last question for you. So we kind of think about, the Brooks Act and SF 330 submissions. So what kind of wording and should AEC firms understand that changes in procurement that are typically used in IT and the software vocabulary that translate the Brooks Act and typical SF 330 submissions?
So Brooks Act and SF 330 submissions, that's long been about qualifications. So that is one area where we're seeing the technology realm really kind of stealing from the AEC community in a lot of ways. You'll hear one of the terms that you're going to hear a lot of is commercial solutions openings. This is widely used. Well, I shouldn't say widely. It's wanted to be widely used for things like software and technology, buying new technologies, applications, things of that nature. Because a lot of our tech companies, they're not part of our GovCon family per se. We do have some who designed and grew up and understand, but a lot of them, that's just not how they developed over time. And they don't want to learn the FAR. They've never wanted to learn the FAR. Now they still follow commercial contract law. So you'll hear CSOs where, it allows you to leverage that commercial contract law, engage with those tech companies. That is when you peel back all the layers, that is very similar to what we do with the SF 330s. We're not concerned about the FAR says. We're concerned about what qualifications do you bring to the table, because we don't even want to talk about anything else until we know that you can actually deliver the A&E services that we need. So I think you see them applying things and trying to translate between, but that's probably one of the biggest terms.
Got it. Well, great. Well, I know people probably have a lot of other questions for you, and Tracy, this has definitely been very, very beneficial. And her contact information is on the next page, but also when we send out all the information afterwards, if you want to reach out to her directly, please feel free to do that. Yeah, there it is. But please feel free to continue to share questions, any comments. And Ed, thank you for your comments as well when you're looking at it from the core perspective as well. But Tracy, thank you again. Definitely very informative. But I've got a couple of closing SAME and DC post comments I need to just run through. But thank you again for everyone for being here. And definitely enjoyed the upcoming or today's panel. We have a couple of upcoming events that we have planned, so please make sure you mark your calendar for some local post events as well as upcoming national events. So join us next month for our it's March 1st Friday, on Friday, March 6th, as Dr. Gabriel Legend from Visioneer IT presents on making AI blind spots, agent data, and security risks. The session will examine how emerging AI tools and AI agents are reshaping AEC workflows while introducing often unseen data security, confidentiality, and governance risks, and outlining practical steps organizations can take to identify and reduce those risks early. The registration is now open. And so if you're interested in sharing your knowledge on current educational topics on our First Friday webinar series with our members, we are accepting presentations for spring 2026. So please visit our website if you'd like to submit a topic today. We do have a couple of national events coming on. The 2026 Career Workshop is returning with live sessions this February or this month. So if you're transitioning from a military to private industry, or you're simply looking for a job, this program will help you update your resume, understand more about career options, and also help you network within the community. So registration is open. Save the date is open for the members only CAP week, which is going to be in Rockville, and all the government agencies are there to help you grow and expand your business development portfolio and your pipeline. And you'll see that'll be March 24th to 26th. And then out in Portland, Oregon, with the annual Joint Engineer Training Conference, JETC. This brings together programs and training for the next year ahead. You can learn more about it out at samejetc.org. But also, we have a very busy schedule here for the post. The STEM scholarship applications are now open for undergraduate, trade school, and graduate STEM students. We usually award a little more than $75,000, but the deadline is Monday, the end of March. So if you have anybody interested, please feel free to let them know about that. If you do have a high school student interested in attending one of our engineering and construction camps this summer, applications are open through March 11th for students and mentors. Camps are usually located near a military installation. There is one out in Hawaii this year. And we also do have a local opportunity for graduating high school students in the AEC at the Phelps High School in DC. And if you'd like to participate in that, it will be a mentoring session each Thursday in February. And you can go online to learn more about that. Our next meetup will be at the historic Navy nuclear ship Savannah, and you'll be able to tour that. We did have a first Friday on that, so it's a great program. If you're interested, definitely sign up for that. You can join us for a free tour of the U.S. Botanical Garden production facility as part of the Architect of the Capitol's campus facilities. So join us on March 7th. It's about an 85,000 square foot greenhouse. And if you are registered for CAP Week on Tuesday, March 24th, one of our Ukrainian field chapter, in partnership with the Blue Ridge Post, the DC Post, and ISOA, we're going to have something called the Road to Ukraine Reconstruction. It's an afternoon panel on Ukrainian defense, military, and industry leaders discussing opportunities and timing to rebuild Ukraine's infrastructure during and after the conflict. Save the date for the APA Federal Planning Workshop, which is going to be returning to DC June 16th through 18th at the National Press Club. It's a 3-day conference, which is in partnership with the APA Federal Planning Division and the DC Post. And then the Mid-Atlantic and one of our big events is the DC and Nova Post 18th Annual Small Business Conference. We will be returning to the Capitol Turnaround in the Navy Yard. We'll have more than 30 agencies and more than 450 attendees together to hear directly from the government leaders on upcoming opportunities and forecasts. So please be sure to visit a DC Post for a full list of educational and social events throughout the year. Connect with us on LinkedIn as we share industry news, event photos, while building a strong network throughout the AEC industry. And you can, of course, watch all of our past First Friday webinar sessions on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to reach a global community of more than 7,000 architecture, engineering, construction, and tech leaders with the DC Annual Post sponsorship, you have the opportunity to leverage our networks to showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't get anywhere else. Support with the annual sponsorship, program sponsorship, just like this First Friday webinar series. You can check out all the benefits of our sponsorship and support the mission of DC Post and your community today. So again, thank you, Tracy, for today, for providing educational content for the First Friday webinar series. And if you haven't, you can download today's document before you leave the webinar, just where the arrow is pointing. You can download the slides, opt in a list of attendees, and your PDH certificate. You can look for an email labeled document delivery with all the slide, PDH certificate, and the opt-in list of participants. And we will post a recording on our website later on this month. So you might also get an email from Tracy, more on information on what was presented, how you can sign up for their newsletter and announcements as well. So finally, thank you again for our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild and KCCT. So on behalf of myself, Bree Beal, and Samantha Long, have a great weekend. We look forward to seeing you out at the next DC Post event. Thank you.